Hi, in this video I'll be talking about something a little bit different to what I normally talk about. Normally I'll talk about current products, ones that are available to buy now. Clearly you can tell by this one that it's not. This is a little bit of a blast from the past. This is the Dyson DC07. And all I want to do is I want to show you around the product, some of the features and benefits that it used to offer, because clearly it's not for sale now. Just before I start, I would appreciate it if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just give us a quick thumbs up. So this is one of the original corded vacuums that Dyson made. They had a production run of 7 years, so it's between 2001 and 2008. So what's quite funny is I mentioned to a close friend of mine that I was going to be talking about this today. She did say that over 20 years old, it is a vacuum cleaner from the olden days. Not quite sure it's from the olden days. I'd put that back a lot further than 20 years. But anyway, the DC07, as I just mentioned, is one of the original corded vacuum cleaners. Cordless wasn't even around in those days, so it's quite a long way off. So I must admit, the condition of this one that we've just had back from a customer is not great. I've not cleaned it up at all. This is just literally how it arrived back. This is the original DC07. There were different incarnations of it. And the main thing that varied, well, I suppose so, some of the models, there were things like the DC07 Click, the DC07 Origin, there was the Allergy, the Animal, just trying to think of other models. But there were around 4 different models that arrived. Normally they were more like special edition models. Apparently the Animal, so the DC07 Animal was the first model that Dyson introduced as an animal vacuum. And they've really carried that on. So even going back over 20 years, they've carried on the Animal name. It's only recently, over this year, that they've started to drop the concept of animal. And what happens when people see the animal logo or pet or zoo, then what will happen is if they've not got an animal, then it will immediately put them off because they think that they're paying for something that they're not going to benefit from. And that's really why Dyson have started to drop the animal name. And I suppose it will take a year or two to get through the system. Whether they reintroduce it in the future, we're not too sure about. But anyway, so the DC07, as you can see here, it's quite a chunky vacuum. What I'm going to do, when I get towards the end of this, I'm going to get one of the modern corded vacuums just to compare it. I'm going to sit it next to it. Back over 20 years ago, the weight of the vacuum was important, but really for Dyson, I suppose really the suction and the performance was number one on their list. If you wanted a Dyson, then you're almost prepared to buy a vacuum that is going to be a bit heavier. I mean, this one itself is around 9 kilograms, so it's quite a weight, even by today's standards on some of the vacuums. The bin capacity, you're looking at just over 3 litres, so it's around 3.3 litres on this. By today's standard, that is a huge capacity. There are not many vacuums that have got that kind of bin capacity. On this model, you had the trigger at the top, and the idea is it's a similar concept to some of the models now. Now, this is actually broken at the bottom. As you can see, it is full of dirt, so I'm going to try not to let that go to make a mess in the showroom. But with this model, again, all you needed to do was to pull that. And apparently this was one of the first models where you can actually have the bin at the bottom. So you've got the flap at the bottom and just go and empty it through the bin. On some of the earlier generation models, like the DC04, especially the DC01, then you just had to take the bin apart to go and empty it. Now, when it comes to the filtration, you've got the 2 filters. You've got the permanent filter here. So you've got that one there, and you've got one on the side. What I should have mentioned earlier, and I'm not quite sure why I didn't, are some of the differences between some of the models. Now, clearly this is the DC07. Now, as you go from the DC07 to models like the Origin, the Animal, especially to the Allergy, and that's the reason I mention it now, because with the Allergy, you had different kind of filtration. So you had a permanent HEPA filter at the bottom here. Also, the main difference could have been things like the tools. So things like the Animal would normally have arrived with a turbo brush as well. That's the little rotating brush that is still used nowadays. But I'm not going to go through all the differences, but I should have mentioned that earlier. And clearly the colour of the vacuum would have varied as well. Also, when it comes to the filtration, you've got a separate filter on the side here. And the idea of this is that you take this out, and you should be able to take it out. At the moment that is well and truly jammed in there. If I wanted to show you, I'd just need to go and get a screwdriver to go and remove it. Personally, I don't think it's been that well maintained, but I'm not quite sure when it was last used. It could have been one that just a customer's had for a while, because we do offer to recycle vacuums as well if a customer buys another one from us. But all that would normally happen is that filter would come out, and then you would give it a quick wash, make sure it's completely dry, and then pop it back in here. And that's not really changed, you know, even over the last 20 odd years. That kind of concept of filter hasn't really changed. So, you know, it's quite good that they've the technology that they had back then has really stayed to today. And then it's really easy just to pop that back in. That just clips in on the side, and then the bin pops on there like that. Just as you come around the side, Dyson have always been really good at putting these in. This is where you can normally get a blockage. You normally get a build-up of hair or dirt, especially if you've got animals, say big clumpy hair or fur, then that's a really good way to get a blockage. So I remember selling these back sort of 20 odd years ago. We did so many of these, and I remember this was a really good selling tool, especially if people have got animals. And the idea was you just took that out, see if there's a blockage there. So if you'd had a loss of suction, that was always normally the first place to go. So that just pops in there like that. As far as around the back, you've got space to pop one of the tools or a couple of the tools. Clearly it's missing at the moment. The main one here was the cheeky little crevice tool. That always just slotted on the back there. And then just on the side, you'd have a brush that just popped in there. And again, compared to the modern vacuums, that's not really changed. As far as so that's the mains cable. They've not really changed the mains a lot. It normally tends to vary between 8 and 10 meters. That tends to be quite a good length of cable. Now this was one of the first vacuums this was apparently the first vacuum that Dyson made where not so much you had the translucent or transparent hose, they'd done that for a while, but this was the first vacuum that you could actually take this out and swap it round like that. So all you did is put that in there and pop that in, and then you could use that. Now I must admit, I haven't got one of the early generation models, either DC01 or DC04. I've just relied on the information from a couple of websites that I've gone onto. But yes, that was the first time you could do that, and that's really good because I suppose if you wanted to get cobwebs up in the corner, then you've got the handle there as well. You could also put the tools in there, so if you wanted to just get around your skirting board, then you just pop the tools in there and away you go. But I was always pleased and again, it was always a really good selling point having a transparent hose. I suppose the main thing to mention, and we were honest with customers, that when it does get dirty, then it's a lot more difficult to see where the blockage is, but at least you get a good idea roughly where it is. I always like these because the hoses are always really flexible, and if you did ever need to change the hose, it's really easy as well. All you needed to do was just to take this part off. There's a little clip on the inside, and then the whole hose arrangement comes off. Now I just mentioned about this model having this like little service hatch, I suppose as they call it. Also there is another one underneath, and that just pulls off like that. And as you can see, it could do with a really good clean, this one. But having those two, that was normally a really good way of checking to see if there are any blockages. So I've just gone through some of the information on the DC07 and some of the features and benefits that it offered. I must admit, fantastic vacuums. These were absolutely brilliant, especially in the day we sold loads of these. I did say that I'd get one of the modern vacuums just to show you next to it. This is the Ball Animal. So this is one of the latest incarnations of corded vacuums that we sell. And again, we still do a lot of these. They are still very good vacuums. So if you're comparing some of the differences on the models, clearly the design has completely and utterly changed, which you would expect over 20 years. They moved away from the the fixed wheel design, so the two wheels at the back, which is more of a standard design, to the ball concept. I suppose I can't remember exactly when the ball design came in. If you know, let me know. If you've got one of the early incarnations of the Dyson Ball Cleaner, then let me know which model it is and when you got it. But with these models, first of all, as you can see, bin capacity really reduced. It's something that Dyson don't see as a huge factor now. You've gone from over 3 litres to just over a litre. It's around 1.15 litres. So that's, for me, when I'm talking to a customer, it's something I tend to mention about the bin capacity, because I'm not really a fan of small bins, because what you don't want to be doing is to keep on emptying the vacuum, especially if you've got a large property, and especially with a corded vacuum, because with a cordless vacuum, you are limited to, I suppose, how long you can vacuum for. The longest on most vacuums tends to be between 40 and 60 minutes, but clearly with a corded one, you're not limited. It's just by the, I suppose, the mains lead. You know, as long as it can reach, then you can carry on vacuuming. So the bin capacity is a big thing. Also the power, so the suction on the models. So you're going from a 1400 watt motor down to a 700 watt motor. Now that's not because Dyson wanted to do that, that's really because of the regulations that are in at the moment. And a couple of other main differences. First of all, you've got things like the air watts, that's the actual suction of the vacuum cleaner. Now that's varied a huge amount. Basically on the original DC07, that was around 280 air watts, and as you come up to the modern Dyson Ball Animal, then this has been reduced to around 90 air watts. Now what you'll find is although the suction isn't quite as good as on some of the older vacuums, clearly a lot of that is going to be dependent on the wattage of the motor, which has reduced from 1400 down to 700. But what you will find is the actual pickup ability of the vacuum will, or should be better, on the more modern vacuum. What we find is that Dyson have put a lot more emphasis on the brush bar and the way this is designed compared to how it was, say, 20 odd years ago. And the bristles are a lot stiffer now, and what that will mean is that again the pickup ability on the vacuum will be better. And the main advantage is that, I suppose in theory, it's costing less to run the vacuum if you've got a much lower wattage motor. I know when you're buying a vacuum cleaner, the actual running and the cost to run it is way down the list. It's something that when we're talking about things like tumble dryers, washing machines, fridge freezers, we're always talking about running costs. But when it comes to using a vacuum cleaner, the actual cost of running the appliance just, I'll be honest, isn't really talked about. So that's one benefit now of the more modern vacuums. Something else to talk about, and I suppose the final thing, is the weight of the vacuum. You're looking around 7 kilograms compared to 9 kilograms. I know they are, well, even on some of these ones, for some people you lift it up and you think it's quite heavy, but it's not as heavy as the original Dyson. And as you go to some of the earlier models, they were even heavier. But even the 2 kilograms difference between the two does make a difference. And also using the overall ball design is so much easier. I must admit, when we've demonstrated this in the shop, I think that the whole concept of the way it moves is a lot easier. So I'm really pleased that Dyson have improved that over the years. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this quick video looking at the Dyson DC07, a little bit of reminiscing for me. I do remember selling these. As I say, we've done loads over the years, and some of the other generations of the DC07, and also just comparing it with the modern Ball Animal. But as I say, I hope you enjoyed it. You might have learnt a little bit, you might not have learnt a bit, but anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please give us a thumbs up, just click subscribe on my YouTube channel. Leave any comments below. I'd always ask for comments, whether it's good or bad. If you think I could have done something, I know comparing the two models would have been something that I could have done. I will be honest, this model isn't working. It's one that we've had back from a customer. I have tried it and it doesn't work. I think it's the motor that's gone in this. But anyway, thanks for joining me.